I have good news for everybody, and I have bad news for everybody. The good news is about, 25% of what you're about to hear. The bad news is 75%. So, first of all, thank you to everybody who did their best to get the New York Times to issue a correction on their insanely false claim about Cenk Uygur. They portrayed an interview Cenk Uygur did with David Duke as if he was agreeing with him. And they put a quote of Cenk saying, "No, of course you're not a racist," talking about David Duke. And the quote was immensely sarcastic because for the entire interview, Cenk was hostile and he was pummeling David Duke into the ground for his anti-Semitism. So, since all of you guys reached out to CNN and you said, hey, listen, you need to retract, you need to issue a correction, and you need to apologize, the New York Times at least did a correction. Now, this is a pretty weak correction, and they obviously should go a lot further than this, but at least it's something. So they say, correction, an earlier version of this article referred imprecisely to a remark by Cenk Uygur, a radio host running for Congress. I like how they refer to him as a radio host. I don't know if he's been on the radio for over 5 years now. He's obviously done a lot more than that. He's the co-founder, or actually the founder of Wolfpack. He's the co-founder of the largest progressive online news network. He's the co-founder of Justice Democrats. He's done quite a bit, and they decided to describe him as a radio host. They say when David Duke appeared on his show and denied being a racist, Mr. Uygur was sarcastic when he replied, "No, of course not." Now, this is weak, but it's something. And I want to say thank you to everybody who reached out to the New York Times, because it was an unconscionable thing that they put, and it couldn't stand. And now they haven't apologized. They haven't issued a statement as to how this could have happened in the first place, but at least this is something. So again, thank you guys for getting involved. You actually made a giant difference here. If it wasn't for you, and if it wasn't for all the tweets, if it wasn't for all the emails, if it wasn't for the over 1 million people who saw the video correcting them, this wouldn't have happened. So, again, this is really important, and this is amazing. Now, I wake up today, the very next day after the New York Times issues their correction, okay? One of the first things I see, Jake Tapper tweeting, "Absolutely disgusting. The misogyny is appalling. The great and professional CNN host and all the women of CNN are owed an apology." Now, the reason why you can't see this tweet here is because I'm blocked by M. Mendoza Ferrer. For those of you who don't know, she is a corporate Democratic opposition research goon. And her whole job is to try to take down the left. And all of these smears against Cenk and other lefties have originated from her account. She's going through all of the old broadcasts and whatnot from the Young Turks, and she's saying, "Oh my God, look at this terrible thing that Cenk said here, or Anna said here." And the whole thing is to try to get everybody riled up and for there to be a PC outrage mob that takes down the left. And she's come after me in the past. She comes after a variety of people on the left. And this is what she does. Now, what she tweeted out here, you're going to love this, is a video of Hassan Piker, Cenk's nephew, on his Twitch stream, and he's reacting to a video of CNN talking to Ro Khanna, interviewing Ro Khanna, and they try to ask Ro Khanna a got you question because Ro Khanna had originally endorsed Cenk Uygur. And she pronounces Cenk's name like Cenk Uygur, just like absolutely butchers it 1,000 ways. And so, in jest, Hassan Piker is talking, and he goes, "Man, these C words at CNN, like if you're going to smear Cenk and call him a racist, at least get his name right." And so she clipped out the thing of him saying the C word and tweeted it out there. And Jake Tapper jumped in to say, "Absolutely disgusting. The misogyny is appalling. The great and professional CNN hosts and all the women of CNN are owed an apology." Is it just a coincidence that a day after the New York Times and all these outlets smeared Cenk Uygur, and the New York Times had to issue an apology, that Jake Tapper comes out the next day and tries to go on the offense against Cenk Uygur's nephew? Hey, Jake, this is Cenk's nephew. Hassan Piker isn't running for office. Cenk Uygur is running for office. Why are you not talking about Cenk Uygur? Why are you talking about his nephew? Now, it occurred to me immediately after this, guys. CNN also wrote a hit piece on Cenk Uygur, and they also told a malicious falsehood. So Cenk tweeted about this last night after the New York Times correction, and he said, here's their quote, talking about the quote from CNN. Quote, Cenk invited former Ku Klux Klan leader David Duke for a segment about his anti-Semitic view of Judaism. New York Times has already issued a correction. Are Ryan Nobles and Dan Merica going to follow suit? Was it a mistake or on purpose? If it's not malicious, they'll correct. So again, let me read that one more time. Cenk, quote, invited former Ku Klux Klan leader David Duke for a segment about his anti-Semitic view of Judaism. They make it seem like he invited him to pal around with him and get along with him, when of course, the entire time, he was pummeling him into the ground and disagreeing with him at every turn and calling him out at every turn. So CNN also did the exact same thing as the New York Times. At least the New York Times issued some version of a retraction. CNN hasn't issued any retraction. And instead, the next day, they wake up and decide to go after Cenk's nephew. Cenk's nephew isn't running for Congress. Cenk Uygur is running for Congress. Guys, how many weeks now has Cenk Uygur been running for Congress? I kid you not when I say I haven't seen a single story in mainstream media talking about any of Cenk's policy positions. Agree with them or disagree with them. There's not been a single article about how Cenk Uygur supports Medicare for all. There's not been a single article about how Cenk Uygur wants to legalize marijuana. There's not been a single article about how Cenk Uygur wants free college and wants to end the wars, and how his number one issue is getting money out of politics. There hasn't been a single issue about Justice Democrats, about Wolfpack. There hasn't been a single issue. There hasn't even been an article that mentions his record of co-founding Justice Democrats and founding Wolfpack. Nothing about that. Nothing. They've totally ignored the thing that should be the main discussion in a congressional race, which is policy. And now they've decided, I'm just going to snipe at Cenk's nephew, and demand that he apologize. No, Jake, how about you apologize? And that's where you guys come in. So I tweeted, let's see here. Which one did I do first? I did this one first. I responded to Jake Tapper and said, Haas isn't running for office. Cenk is. And your network said he, quote, invited former KKK leader David Duke for a segment about his anti-Semitic views. When he pummeled him for those anti-Semitic views, will CNN retract like the New York Times did, or keep the blatant falsehood? And I tagged the hosts here. And then, I also threw in here the New York Times retraction to let them know that, yes, they retracted, and obviously you need to do it as well. And then I tweeted again and said, why is CNN portraying Cenk Uygur's interview pummeling David Duke like he was supportive of David Duke? And then I tagged him, Jake Tapper, Ryan Nobles, and @Merica. You must correct like the New York Times did. The failure is unconscionable. And then I said, this tweet correcting the absolutely insane claim from the New York Times and CNN that Cenk was agreeing with David Duke has 1.3 million views. Will CNN correct like the New York Times did, or keep sniping at Cenk's nephew instead? So guys, let's be crystal clear about what's going on here. CNN and traditional media, they've declared war on Cenk Uygur. They've declared war on him because there have been so many just gross, over-the-top smears that it would be a minor miracle if it was just laziness or incompetence. And it is overwhelmingly likely that it is malicious and dishonest on purpose, and they don't care because all they want to do is take him down. So what I need you all to do is exactly what we did yesterday with the New York Times, that at the very least got them to issue a correction no matter how weak that correction was. I need you to go on Twitter, tweet at Jake Tapper, Ryan Nobles, and at Merica. That's Dan Merica. These are all CNN people who were responsible for that article or are responsible for smears. Tweet at them and say, the New York Times corrected their claim about Cenk Uygur and David Duke. You need to do it as well. Now, again, I'll stress here, be respectful. Don't do anything that would get you in trouble or me in trouble, but do exactly what you did yesterday, because it was such an overwhelming response from well-meaning people that CNN had no choice but to issue a correction because their name is on the line. Well, CNN still has up their gross smear about Cenk, pretending like he somehow is agreeing with David Duke's anti-Semitism. So I need you again. Go on Twitter, tweet at these three, and tell them they must correct the Cenk Uygur David Duke lie and apologize to him instead of, sniping at Cenk's nephew. Guys, I'll say it one more time. We're now weeks into this race. I haven't seen a single story or a single conversation about where Cenk Uygur stands on the issues. All of it is a desperate, over-the-top attempt at PC outrage. I'm floored at how disingenuous this is. I'm really in awe. Because you would think they would at least have to balance it to some extent with serious coverage about where he stands on the issues. But they don't. There's none of that at all. And just so you know, buckle up. Because I am sure they're going to go through a million more TYT broadcasts from back in the day when Cenk was trying to emulate Howard Stern. I'm sure they're going to go after Anna. I'm sure they're going to go after Haas. They might even throw me in there for good measure, even though it makes no sense to do such a thing. It makes no sense to do it for any of them. But this is all they have. All they have is going back in time, taking politically incorrect statements, taking them out of context, and feigning outrage. Because I have to tell you, I don't really think they're outraged about anything Cenk has ever said. And I don't think that these are good faith attacks. So, listen, man, honestly, how dare Jake Tapper? How dare he? At a time when CNN still has an article up pretending like Cenk Uygur was kind of agreeing with David Duke when he was pummeling him into the ground. A grotesque smear. Comparing a Democratic congressional candidate to the most notorious anti-Semitic person in the country. At the same time CNN has that up, Jake Tapper is demanding apologies from Cenk's nephew, who isn't running for office. They've declared war on Cenk Uygur. And it's time for us to declare war back in the sense that we correct them at every turn. And we demand the corrections and the retractions and the apologies. Because it's a new day in America. And you can't just control the narrative the whole time. It turns out the people have a say. And you know what? The people want a fighter for Medicare for all and free college and a living wage and ending the bribery and the corruption. And so hopefully the people can see through your weak attempts to undermine and smear in a really underhanded way. So anyway, guys, please get involved. Please tweet at these CNN hosts. Please tell them to correct the article. I'll give you the quote one more time that CNN had in their article. They said Cenk Uygur invited former Ku Klux Klan leader David Duke for a segment about his anti-Semitic view of Judaism. Again, that makes it sound like, yeah, he's just palling around with him. No, he was pummeling him at every turn. So if they're not malicious and this wasn't a dishonest lie and smear attempt, okay, CNN, then fix it. Correct it and apologize. At the very least, the New York Times at least corrected it. They didn't apologize, even though they should. But come on, CNN, what are you doing? Or would you rather just keep sniping at Cenk Uygur's nephew, who wasn't even on his network when he said those things, and he's not running for office?